My name is Claire, and 3 weeks ago I buried my father. Or at least I thought I did, until my mother called from Cancun, giggling with her soulmate, while I stood in the rain clutching a folded flag and trying not to scream. If you've ever felt the sharp twist of betrayal from someone meant to protect you, you might already know this isn't just grief. This is the beginning of something much, much bigger. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching this video from? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing where stories travel. Now, let me take you to the moment I realized my mother was capable of the unthinkable. The storm didn't wait. Thick clouds rolled over Asheville like a slow invasion, dulling every flower and dragging the color from the air. I stood just outside the funeral home, the navy of my dress soaked to the skin, staring at a face etched into marble that I wasn't ready to say goodbye to. My father, Daniel Simmons, was the kind of man who believed in morning walks, worn flannel shirts, and showing up. No matter what. Heart failure, they said, quick, peaceful. Words that felt too clean for the mess he left behind. People milled around inside, neighbors, former coworkers. My cousin Lydia had flown in from Portland and was now offering soggy tissues to people she hadn't seen in years. I couldn't move. Not yet. The rain stung like needles against my scalp as I dialed my mother's number. She hadn't shown up, not to the viewing, not to the burial. And not today when the only thing keeping me upright was rage. She answered on the second ring. "Claire, darling, can you believe this place? Turquoise water everywhere. I'm sipping a mango daiquiri and it tastes like sin." Her laughter crackled through the speaker. Bright, carefree, my voice cracked before I could even get a full sentence out. "You're in Cancun? Now, your husband just died." There was a beat of silence on her end. Then she sighed. "Oh, Claire, life moves on, darling. You should too." It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it, light, like he'd been a flat tire or a cold sore, not a man she'd shared 31 years with. My hand clenched around the phone so tight I thought the screen might crack. "You didn't even come to the funeral," I said, each word trembling with disbelief. "I didn't see the point," she replied, unbothered. "He's not really there, is he?" Thunder rolled above us like the sky itself was angry. "Who's he?" I asked. "The man you used to love, or the man you left behind so you could play 20-something with some tropical bartender named, what, Javier?" She laughed again. "Michael, actually, and he's not a bartender. He owns 5 resorts. We're soulmates, Claire. You'll understand someday." Michael. The name burned its way into my brain. I hadn't heard it before, but the way she said it, possessive, triumphant, made something twist in my stomach. "Don't call me darling," I snapped. "You didn't even come. You let me handle everything. You didn't sign the forms. You didn't stand beside me. You weren't there to help me lower him into the ground." For the first time, her tone sharpened. "Well, excuse me for not grieving your way. Some of us move forward. You always did cling to the past like it owed you something." The line went dead. Just like that. I stared at my phone in stunned silence as the wind whipped through the trees and the rain soaked my heels into the mud. A cold numbness started to creep up my spine, like the part of me that trusted her was shutting down one nerve at a time. Behind me, someone called my name. The pastor wanted to begin. I turned toward the darkened chapel, but something inside me stayed facing the storm. Because in that moment, as the weight of everything she didn't say settled in my chest, I knew. Something about this funeral didn't feel final. And my mother? She was lying through her perfect white teeth. That night, Asheville was silent in a way that scraped at my nerves. My apartment, a second-floor walk-up above a quiet bookstore, had always felt safe, predictable. But now, everything I touched felt wrong. My father's coat still hung by the door, right where I left it after the hospital visit. I hadn't been able to move it. Not yet. The clock blinked 1:13 a.m. in pale green light. I'd been scrolling through photos for hours. Old camping trips, birthday dinners, selfies we'd taken during pandemic walks when the world felt like it was folding in. My father always smiled with his whole face, like he was really there, unlike her. Every time my mother's voice echoed in my head, "You should move on," I felt the urge to throw something. I whispered into the stillness, "How do you move on from a lie?" And then my phone buzzed, just once. I blinked at it, expecting another guilt-laced voicemail from my mother or a condolence message I'd missed. But the contact name on the screen made my chest seize, Dad, the number he'd had for a decade. The one I'd left a tearful voicemail on just yesterday, forgetting for a moment that he was gone. I fumbled to unlock it, breath catching. One message, 5 words, "Help me, go to the cemetery quickly." I read it twice, then a third time. The buzzing silence of the room seemed to close in, like the walls were leaning forward, watching my reaction. "This can't be real," I whispered, frozen. My finger hovered over the screen. For a split second, I almost laughed. Some sick joke. Someone hacked his number. My mom, maybe, or Michael the soulmate from Cancun playing games. That's all it could be. But no one else knew where we'd buried him. No one would know what that would do to me. I stood slowly, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. A second message arrived. They're watching. Don't trust anyone. My knees nearly gave out. "Dad," I said aloud, as if saying it might conjure him, explain something, anything. This had to be a prank, it had to be. But if it wasn't, I threw on the nearest jacket, grabbed my keys, and bolted down the stairs barefoot. The air outside was sharp and cold, slapping me fully awake. The sky above Asheville was moonless, and the only sound was the wet hush of tires rolling across distant pavement. Even the streetlights felt dimmer than usual. I stood at my car, shivering and shaking, staring at the cemetery address in my contacts. It was 20 minutes away. Logic screamed at me not to go. Call the police. Call someone, but what would I even say? My dead father just texted me. They'd laugh, or worse, they'd question my sanity. And maybe they should. But still, I couldn't shake the way my dad used to say, "If you ever doubt what's real, start with what you feel. It'll never lie to you." Right now, I felt terrified, suspicious, and under it all, hope. The kind that made your stomach flip before your brain catches up. Because if there was even a sliver of a chance, I got in the car and turned the key. The engine hesitated before starting, headlights cutting through the mist like knives. As I pulled onto the road, my breath clouded in front of me. The heater hadn't warmed up yet. Somewhere between the soft hum of the tires and the glow of the dashboard, I realized I was whispering the same word over and over. "Please, please let it be him. Please don't let this be cruel. Please let me be wrong about everything." I didn't know where this road would end, but I knew one thing for certain. Someone wanted me afraid, and they were doing a very, very good job. The iron gates of the cemetery loomed in front of me like something out of a dream I didn't want to have. Everything looked different at night. The trees, bare and twisting in the wind, clawed at the fog like they were trying to escape it. My headlights flickered off gravestones, illuminating brief flashes of names, dates, epithets. Beloved father, devoted wife. Gone too soon. I parked by the curb but left the engine running, just in case. The gate creaked open under my hand. The kind of sound that gets used in horror movies, because it doesn't need help to feel terrifying. Gravel crunched beneath my boots as I stepped inside, pulling my jacket tighter around me. The fog thickened instantly, swallowing the car's lights like a curtain falling behind me. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but I kept going. My father's grave was near the edge. Under an old oak tree, he always said reminded him of his childhood in the mountains. I followed the narrow path, passing rows of names I didn't recognize, each one a silent witness. The air was cold enough to sting my lungs. My breath came out in short, visible bursts as I whispered, "What am I doing?" No answer, just silence, heavy. A kind of silence that made you feel small, like something was waiting for you to speak first. And then I saw it, his headstone. Daniel H. Simmons, 1959-2023. Beloved husband and father. Keeper of every promise. I knelt beside it, knees pressing into the wet earth, and ran my fingers across the letters. I'd picked that inscription myself, keeper of every promise, because he never let me down, not once. So what was this, a prank, a warning? A goodbye he couldn't give in life? Then I saw it. A manila envelope tucked carefully at the base of the headstone, half covered by a damp pile of leaves. My breath caught. I reached for it slowly, as if it might vanish. It was sealed. No name on the front. Just the weight of secrets inside. As I stood, envelope in hand, something rustled in the trees behind me. I spun around. "Hello," I called out, my voice barely more than a breath. "Is someone there?" Nothing. The wind shifted through the branches again, another rustle, this time to my right. I turned quickly, heart hammering in my chest. The fog made everything feel closer than it was, like it was pressing in, listening. "Who's there?" I called again, louder this time. A crack, sharp and sudden. A branch breaking. A footstep. I took a step back, clutching the envelope like it could protect me. My eyes darted through the mist. Nothing but headstones and darkness. I swallowed hard. "You're not funny," I said to the fog, to the cold, to whoever might be out there. My voice trembled, but I kept it firm. "If you're watching me, come out." No one did. The graveyard answered only with silence. Suddenly, every horror story I'd ever heard crawled to the front of my brain. I could almost hear my father's voice saying, "You know better than to go somewhere like this alone at night." "Yeah," I muttered. "Well, too late now." Clutching the envelope to my chest, I turned and walked fast, almost running back toward the gate. My boots slipped on wet gravel, but I didn't stop. My skin prickled like someone was just behind me, reaching out. When I finally reached the car, I yanked the door open, slammed it shut, and locked it twice before I even caught my breath. The engine purred. I looked down at the envelope. My fingers trembled as I held it, afraid to open it, afraid not to. It was real, not a dream, not a glitch, whatever was inside. He wanted me to have it, and someone else didn't want me to find it. I stared into the night, headlights cutting a narrow path through the trees. Then I whispered to no one, "I'm not done with you, Dad, not yet." And I drove away, not noticing until I was back on the main road. That my gas tank, which had been 3/4 full, now blinked empty. I didn't sleep. By the time I got back to my apartment, my hands were still shaking from the cold and from what I'd found, or maybe from what I'd almost seen. The envelope stayed sealed on my kitchen table like a threat or a promise. I stared at it like it might explain itself. Outside, the sky was beginning to pale. The kind of hazy pre-dawn gray that makes shadows look longer than they should be. I brewed coffee I couldn't taste, paced the length of the kitchen, glanced at my phone more times than I could count. No new messages, no Dad. Eventually, I sat down, took a breath I didn't feel, and opened the envelope. Inside were 3 things. A handwritten note in my father's familiar script, a printout of GPS coordinates, and a grainy photo, my mother standing beside a tall man in a linen shirt, holding hands like they'd never broken a single rule in their lives. I stared at the image for a full minute. I didn't recognize the man, but I knew exactly what this was supposed to say. They weren't just together, they were planning something. "Claire," the note began, "I need you to believe what I'm about to tell you. I couldn't trust anyone, not even the police, especially not them. I know how insane this sounds. But I promise you, I'm alive, and I need your help." The next part was directions, specific, urgent. "Meet at the location tonight after dark. Come alone, destroy this note after reading." My eyes skimmed the address twice before pulling up the coordinates on my phone. It was a state forest just outside Asheville. The kind of place people go for fishing and disappearances. I'd been there once as a kid. Dad took me hiking on a school break. I remembered the creek, the long drive in, the strange quiet. And now he wanted me to meet him there. I ran a hand through my hair, nearly laughing at the absurdity. Was it really him? The writing was his, but what if someone was copying it? What if this was bait? What if she knew I was suspicious and wanted to scare me off? I pressed my forehead to the table. "I'm losing my mind," I whispered. But the truth was, I wanted it to be real. I wanted my father alive. I wanted a reason for all of this, for the faked death, for the sudden disappearance, for the smug voice of my mother, sipping wine in Cancun while I picked out the urn. No matter how wild it sounded, there was a part of me that knew. Dad wouldn't send me into danger. Not unless it was worse if he didn't. By late afternoon, I had packed a flashlight, my old hiking boots, and pepper spray. I stared at my reflection in the mirror before leaving. Hair messy, eyes bloodshot, but something in me had changed. I wasn't just mourning anymore. I was searching. The drive to the forest was longer than I remembered. The last 10 miles were winding and narrow, framed by thick trees that swallowed the sunlight. By the time I reached the GPS pin, it was almost dark. The car headlights shivered across tree trunks and broken stumps. I followed the coordinates on foot, each step feeling heavier. The map led me down a slope and around a dry creek bed. Then I saw it. A small wooden cabin, almost hidden behind a cluster of pines. The porch light flickered on as I approached, casting long shadows across the ground. I stopped, my breath caught in my throat. There, standing on the porch, wrapped in a worn jacket and looking 10 years older, was my father, alive. "Dad," I whispered, my voice barely audible. His eyes locked with mine, wet with disbelief. "Claire," he breathed, "you came." My knees gave out. He rushed forward, catching me before I hit the ground, arms trembling as he held me. "I'm sorry," he whispered over and over. "I'm so sorry. I couldn't let them win. They were going to destroy me." And just like that, the world I knew splintered. Because the man I buried last week hadn't died at all. The inside of the cabin smelled like wood smoke and damp earth. A single candle burned on the table, flickering just enough to keep the shadows alive. There was no electricity, no cell service, just the slow creak of old beams and the thrum of a truth I wasn't ready to hear. My father, Daniel Simmons, the man I had buried, poured us both a mug of black coffee from a dented thermos. His hands shook. He looked thinner, paler, haunted. I didn't touch the drink. "I need you to start talking," I said. "Now." He sat across from me at the table, his eyes locked on mine. "I know," he said, "but you have to promise not to interrupt, not until I get it all out." I gave a short nod, heart pounding. He took a slow breath. "It started over a year ago. Little things at first, bank statements not matching, documents going missing. I thought I was losing my mind. Or maybe she was right. Maybe I was getting old." He stared into the candlelight like it might carry him back. "Then I found the first forgery. A wire transfer authorization I never signed, $85,000 moved out of our joint account. The signature looked like mine, but something was off. I confronted your mother. She laughed. Laughed, Claire. Said I must have forgotten giving her permission." A bitter smile touched his lips. "But I hadn't. And it wasn't just the one, it was dozens, transfers, property documents, even insurance papers I'd never seen before. Every time I asked, she gaslit me, said I was working too hard, said I needed a vacation, and then Michael." His voice tightened. "I thought he was her yoga instructor, that's what she told me. But he wasn't. He's a private wealth consultant, real estate, offshore accounts. Very, very slick." I closed my eyes, bile rising in my throat. "She was sleeping with him." Dad nodded, eyes shining. "For over a year, while I was running the business, while I was raising you." I pressed a fist to my mouth. He stood up, walked to a small tin box near the wood stove, and brought it to the table. Inside were neatly stacked documents, photocopies, printouts, photographs. He spread them like cards between us. I started making copies the moment I suspected. Had to work fast. She kept the originals in a locked drawer at home. But Claire, this part is the worst. He slid a thick folder toward me. I opened it. A falsified death certificate, an insurance payout confirmation, and a medical report I'd never seen before. "She and Michael forged everything," he said softly. "They filed the paperwork with a contact at the funeral home, staged the whole heart attack, had a stand-in cremation service arranged through a bogus firm in Wilmington. They even sent in DNA to the lab from a cadaver." My breath caught. "That urn on my mantel is filled with firewood ash," he said. "I'm so sorry." Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to cry, not yet. "Why not go to the police?" "Because she's protected," he said bitterly. "Michael's got ties to a judge, two maybe. I tried contacting the FBI through a tip line. They laughed me off, said it sounded like a Netflix pitch." He leaned forward. "That's why I need you. You're the only one she wouldn't suspect. The only one who can move freely through that house without setting off alarms. You want me to spy on her. I want you to get the rest of the evidence," he said, "before she finds it and burns it all." I looked at the papers again, the photos, my mother smiling next to Michael in Belize, my father's name on a forged power of attorney form, signatures faked so well I wouldn't have questioned them. "She wanted you dead," I whispered. He met my eyes. "She wanted me gone." I stood, the legs of my chair scraping hard against the wood. "I'll do it," I said. "Claire. But if we're going to burn her world down," I said, voice sharp, "we do it together." The cabin had gone silent again. After the last word left his mouth, my father just stared at the papers like they still had the power to undo everything. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows. Inside, the candle had burned low, casting long shadows across the documents that now tethered us to a shared betrayal. I couldn't stop shaking. "Where's the rest of it?" I asked. "The originals, the proof." He looked up slowly. There's a safe hidden behind the bookshelf in the study at the Raleigh house. Our family home, the one I hadn't stepped foot in since the funeral. The bookshelf, I repeated. That thing's bolted to the wall. Exactly, he said, a trace of the old sharpness returning to his voice. She thought that would keep it hidden, but I installed that wall unit myself 20 years ago. There's a false panel behind the row of travel books. Push the Antarctica spine inward. It releases a latch. I stared at him, lips parted. She has no idea I knew she was keeping it there, he added. I caught her once when she thought I was asleep, but I pretended not to notice. That's where the originals are, bank authorizations, property transfers. The fake medical examiner's report with Michael's name on it. And you want me to go in there, I said. Walk into her house like nothing happened, poke around, and somehow leave with a briefcase full of evidence without getting caught. You're the only one who can, Claire, he said. She trusts you. I almost laughed. She didn't even show up to your funeral. She's halfway through a bottle of rosé in Cancun with her soulmate and has no idea I know any of this. Which makes this the perfect time, he said firmly. They won't expect it. She thinks you're grieving. You'll say you wanted to pick up some mementos, photos, a watch, something of mine. I ran a hand through my hair. She won't be suspicious if I show up unannounced. She'll be flattered, he said bitterly. She's always loved being in control of the narrative. I hated how right that sounded. I don't want you to do this, he said more gently, but I have no other way in, and time's running out. I know her, Claire. She's going to start liquidating what she hasn't already. Once that safe is empty, we lose everything. I looked down at the envelope, now resting quietly between us. Everything in my life, every rule I'd believed, every memory I'd leaned on was upside down. My mother wasn't just cold. She was calculating, ruthless, dangerous, and I had to play along like nothing had changed. My voice, when it came, was barely audible. What if I mess up? What if I freeze or? She sees through me. She won't, he said. She doesn't see you clearly. She never did. You were just a reflection of the story she wanted people to believe. Perfect daughter, perfect marriage, perfect life. A long silence settled between us. Then I said, she's going to see something else now. His eyes found mine, full of something unspoken. Hope, fear, maybe pride. When do I go? I asked. She gets back Friday. You've got 2 days. Get in, get the documents, and get out. And Claire, be careful. I stood and started toward the door. Where will you be? I asked without turning. Here, he said, for now, but once we have the evidence, I'll go to the FBI again with you. They'll have to listen this time. I nodded, hand on the doorknob, heart already racing ahead of me. I'll text you once I'm in, I said. He hesitated. No, don't. Turn off your phone before you even leave Asheville. Use a burner if you can. A burner, I repeated, my voice hollow with disbelief. Dad, this isn't a spy movie. He didn't laugh. No, he said. It's real life, and in real life, sometimes the villains are the ones who used to kiss you goodnight. I closed the door behind me, stepping back into the cold with the cabin's secrets still echoing in my ears. My boots crunched against the gravel as I walked toward the car. Every step felt heavier than the last, because this wasn't just about stealing files anymore. It was about the last chance to save the man I thought I'd lost. And the only way to do that was to pretend I didn't know my mother was a monster. The driveway looked the same, fresh mulch along the flower beds, 2 lounge chairs neatly arranged on the back deck. Wind chimes hung from the porch rail, clinking gently in the October breeze. Anyone passing by would think this was the home of a woman with a peaceful life, and I was here to rob her, not of money, but of lies. I parked 2 houses down, switched off my phone, and walked up the front steps with a brown paper bag full of framed photos and a sweater that still smelled like my dad. Props. I rang the doorbell, and the familiar chime sent a jolt straight to my ribs. A moment later, the door opened. Claire! My mother blinked in surprise, one hand holding a half-filled wine glass, the other resting casually on the doorframe. She looked tan. Her nails were freshly done, her hair still damp from a recent wash, and behind her stood a man I recognized instantly. Michael, taller in person, sharper. He wore a casual button-down and no shoes. His smile was polite but wary, like he didn't know what version of me to expect. Hi, Mom, I said, managing a thin smile. I needed to see the house again for a few things of Dad's. Her expression didn't soften. If anything, it brightened. like she'd been expecting this moment and was pleased it finally arrived. "Of course, sweetheart. Come in, take whatever you like," she said breezily, stepping aside. I walked in and immediately felt the chill of polished stone floors under my boots. The house still smelled like rosemary and lemon, her signature diffuser scent. On the wall, a new photo had been framed, her and Michael, smiling on a beach I didn't recognize. I hated how calm they looked. Michael gave me a little nod. "Claire." "Michael," I said flatly. "We were just opening a bottle of Syrah," my mother said, already walking back toward the open-plan kitchen. "Want a glass?" "I'm fine," I said, clutching the paper bag tighter. "Take your time," she added, waving a manicured hand toward the hallway. "His things are in the study, or you can check the upstairs closet. I boxed up some of the winter stuff." I hesitated at the edge of the living room. The study was just beyond the hall, a glass-doored space that had once smelled like pipe smoke and ink. It hadn't changed much, the same leather chair, the same antique globe, the same bookshelf. I turned. "I'll just look around a bit." "Take all the time you need," she said, already back in conversation with Michael, who was swiping through something on a tablet. I stepped into the study and quietly shut the door behind me. The air inside was colder. The curtains had been drawn, muting the afternoon light. My eyes locked onto the far wall, where the bookshelf stood, floor to ceiling, lined with books and little bronze figurines. I moved slowly, fingers trailing across titles until I found it, Antarctica, a history of the forgotten continent. I hesitated, took one last look behind me, then pressed the spine inward. Click. A soft mechanical release, just as he said. The panel behind the bottom shelf popped slightly forward. I slid it open with both hands, revealing a steel safe built directly into the wall. Small, dusty, old, my heart was in my throat. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the note he'd given me, the combination. 421687. I turned the dial with shaking fingers, the tumblers clicking into place one at a time. And then the final turn. Thunk. I opened the door. Inside, wrapped in a weatherproof bag, was a thick folder, and a flash drive, and a black leather-bound notebook with my father's initials etched in gold. I didn't let myself breathe. Carefully, I slipped the contents into the paper bag with the framed photo of us from Yellowstone. A perfect cover. No one would look twice. As I closed the safe and pushed the panel back into place, I whispered, "I got it." Then I straightened, checked my reflection in the glass, and walked calmly out of the study. Back in the kitchen, my mother was now flipping through a glossy magazine while Michael scrolled his phone. "Find what you needed?" she asked without looking up. I smiled faintly. "Yeah, some pictures and his watch." She gave a casual wave. "Told you, darling, take anything. It's all just stuff now." No, I wanted to say, what you stole wasn't stuff. It was a life, a marriage, a man, but instead I nodded. "Thanks, Mom." Michael finally looked up, eyes landing briefly on the bag in my arms. "Safe travels," he said, almost too kindly. "Safe," I replied, then turned on my heel and walked out the door. Every step away from that house felt like defusing a bomb. Every second she didn't call after me, every moment Michael didn't ask what was in the bag, felt like I was cheating fate. When I reached my car, I got in and didn't breathe until the engine roared to life. Only then, clutching the bag like it might explode, did I finally allow a whisper of a thought. We have her. I should have left faster. Something in me, maybe pride, maybe stubbornness, kept my feet in the study longer than I should have. I wanted one more look, one more sweep of the room where my father built everything and where she plotted to erase it. The flash drive burned in my pocket. The folder, sealed beneath a sweatshirt I'd casually tucked into the paper bag. Every inch of me screamed to move, to leave, to get out. But then the doorknob clicked. I turned instinctively, and there he was, Michael, leaning in the doorway like he'd just stumbled on something mildly amusing. "You lose something?" he asked, one brow raised, arms crossed in casual menace. The bag in my hands suddenly felt massive. Heavy, too full. I forced a smile, stepping back just slightly from the desk. "Just grabbing some old photos," I said lightly. "Didn't think you'd mind." He didn't move. "You've been in here a while." I shrugged, keeping my voice steady. "This room's hard. I haven't been in it since the funeral." He scanned my face. "You were talking to yourself." "I do that sometimes." I laughed nervously. "Helps me remember what I came for." Michael's gaze slid down to the paper bag, too focused. "What's in there?" I held it up. A framed picture, a sweatshirt of his, and that old fishing cap he used to wear, the one that smelled like bug spray and pipe tobacco. I forced a fond smile, playing the role I knew they expected. Grieving daughter, nostalgic, soft. For a long second he didn't say anything. Then he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You should have told us you were coming." "I wasn't sure I wanted to," I said. "Honestly, I thought Mom might not even be here." "She got back yesterday," he replied, tanned and refreshed. The silence stretched. I moved toward the door. "Well, I've got what I need. I'll head out." He didn't stop me, just followed. Every step down the hallway felt like walking a tightrope. One wrong shift and everything would unravel. In the living room, my mother looked up from her tablet. "Leaving already?" I nodded. "Thanks for letting me stop by." Her smile was faint but satisfied. "Anytime, darling." Michael stood behind me, too close, watching. I felt his eyes trace the shape of the bag again. "I'll walk you out," he said. Of course he would. I kept my expression even, but inside my pulse was a drumbeat. At the front door, he leaned in slightly. His voice dropped low, nearly a whisper. "You always seem too smart for your own good." I turned, smile still frozen in place. "And you always struck me as someone who liked mirrors a little too much." He grinned. "Touché." And then he opened the door for me. I stepped outside, bag secure, spine straight. He didn't follow, not until I'd reached the sidewalk and turned once to glance back. He was still at the door, still watching. He knows, not everything, not yet. But something in his face said he was starting to wonder. I didn't run. That would have given it away. I walked to my car like I wasn't carrying their entire house of cards under my arm. But once I got in, doors locked, engine humming, I exhaled so hard I nearly choked. I didn't check the bag again. I didn't need to. The weight told me everything I needed to know. We were close, so close. But Michael, he wasn't going to let this go. The apartment felt different when I came back. Not just because I had something precious hidden inside my coat, but because I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I didn't kick off my boots or hang up my jacket. I just stood in the center of the room, listening to the walls, waiting for something, anything, to break the tension crawling across my skin. Nothing did. The city buzzed faintly beyond the windows. Horns, distant laughter. Someone dragging a trash bin across the street. I laid the paper bag on the counter like it was sacred. Slowly, carefully, I pulled the folder free. There they were. Original documents, forged signatures, phony death certificate, insurance payouts, internal emails from shell companies with Michael's name buried in the metadata. It wasn't just a smoking gun. It was a fully loaded revolver left at the scene. My father's notebook was tucked inside, too. Full of dates, notes, surveillance photos, and a handwritten list of names, bank officers, realtors, maybe even judges, some crossed out, some underlined. I didn't know what all of it meant yet, but I knew what I had to do. I pulled out the flash drive and slid it into my laptop. Password protected, of course. But the sticky note inside the folder had 4 numbers scrawled across it, his wedding anniversary. I typed it in. Click. A folder opened. Hundreds of files, some video, some audio. Some spreadsheets that made my head spin. He had been collecting everything. I selected the top 20 files and zipped them. Then I opened a burner email he'd given me back at the cabin and hit send. To Daniel Echoes 47 at ProtonMail, com subject, got it. No message, just the attachment. I hit send and waited. 5 minutes passed. Then a reply pinged back. Just one line, "Good job, destroy the originals." I stared at it. No signature, no follow-up, just that one order. I stared at the folder, destroy the originals. Something about it felt wrong, rushed, cold. This wasn't how my father talked, not when he was worried. Not when he was proud. He would have said, "You did great," or "We're almost there." Not this. My stomach flipped. I picked up my phone and called, straight to voicemail. I texted, twice, no response. I checked the email again, tried replying, no answer. My mind started spinning. Maybe he had to go dark. Maybe someone was near. Maybe they were closing in and he couldn't risk more contact. Or maybe I stood and paced, my thoughts louder than the hum of the refrigerator. Maybe that message hadn't come from him. Maybe someone else had access. Someone who wanted the evidence gone. Someone who knew exactly how to play me. I ran to the sink, filled a pot with water, and tossed the folder in. But at the last second, I hesitated. My hand hovered above the burner knob. I couldn't do it. Instead, I yanked the folder out, dripping wet, and shoved it into a Ziploc bag, then into the freezer. My hands were shaking. I turned back to my phone, still no messages, no emails, nothing. "Dad," I whispered, staring at the screen. "Where did you go?" My chest tightened. Because deep down, I already knew something had gone wrong. 3 days passed, no word, no text, no call, no sign. My father had disappeared like a ghost. I checked the encrypted inbox obsessively, called burner numbers. Drove out toward the woods once, but the road had been blocked by forestry crews after a storm. No cabin, no clues, just a suffocating silence that crept into everything. Still, I held on to the freezer evidence like it was sacred. Frozen lies wrapped in paper and plastic, sitting beside a bag of peas. I should have known something was coming. But when the knock came, it still shook me to the bone. 3 sharp raps, firm, official. I peeked through the peephole. 2 men in plain clothes. 1 woman in uniform. My heart dropped. I opened the door halfway. "Claire Simmons?" the taller man asked, holding up a badge. I nodded slowly. "You're under arrest for felony breaking and entering, theft of personal property, and possession of stolen documents." The world tilted sideways. "What?" I breathed. Before I could say anything else, the female officer stepped forward. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say." "No, wait, this is a mistake," I stammered, backing up. "That house is mine. That's my father's. I didn't steal anything." They stepped inside. Hands pulled mine behind my back, cold cuffs biting into my wrists. "You're hurting me." "You can explain everything at the station," the man said coolly. I was half dragged down the stairs in my socks, still in pajamas. Neighbors peeked through blinds. 1 woman on the stoop across the street stepped back inside as soon as she saw the cuffs. I was shoved into the back of a cruiser. Panic pulsed behind my eyes. They couldn't be serious. At the station, it only got worse. They didn't let me call my father, just a public defender I'd never met who looked more annoyed than concerned. They sat me in an interview room. White walls, buzzing overhead light, a 2-way mirror that felt like it was watching my thoughts. And then she walked in. My mother, hair styled, pearls on her ears. A beige cashmere coat draped perfectly over her shoulders like she'd walked out of a lifestyle catalog titled Grieving Mother. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I never imagined she'd do this," she sniffled to the officer beside her. "My own daughter." I froze. "You what?" I spat, standing too fast. "She broke into my house," my mother whispered, voice trembling just enough. "She stole personal files. I found the safe open. It felt so violating." "You're lying," I shouted. "You set the whole thing up. You faked Dad's death and stole everything. He's alive." My voice echoed off the walls. The officers exchanged a look. My mother just looked at me with soft, wounded pity. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "he's gone. You're grieving. I understand. But this isn't the way to cope." I lunged at her, restrained instantly by the officer behind me. "You killed his life," I screamed. "You tried to erase him and you framed me to finish the job." "I'm worried about her mental health," she said softly to the officer. All that pressure, I think she snapped. "Stop it," I sobbed, voice raw. "You don't get to win." But in that room she already had. They booked me, took my mugshot, fingerprinted me, shoved me into a holding cell. And as the door slammed behind me, a single thought echoed. She played me, used me to tie up the last loose end. And now I was the criminal. The courtroom was cold, not from temperature, but from the stillness that fills a place when something irreversible is about to happen. A kind of quiet that settles into the bones. My wrists were red from the cuffs. My lawyer whispered about damage control and character witnesses. I couldn't hear her, not over the roar of my own pulse. Across the room, my mother sat poised in a pale blue suit, a lace scarf draped around her neck like she was on her way to brunch instead of burying me. Michael sat beside her, stone-faced, not a flicker of fear. The judge cleared his throat. "Claire Simmons, you stand before this court facing multiple felony charges." I barely heard the rest. Something inside me had already shut down. I kept my eyes on my mother. She didn't look at me once, not once. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn that woman's approval, and now I was seconds away from losing everything because I finally stopped being her puppet. "Preparing to deliver sentencing recommendation." I leaned forward slightly. No sobbing, no last-ditch cries, just silence. And then the courtroom doors slammed open. Hard, every head turned. 3 people in navy windbreakers stormed in bold yellow letters on their backs. FBI. Gasps rippled through the room. One of them walked straight up to the judge's bench, handed him a folder, then turned toward the prosecution table. "Diane Simmons," the lead agent said, voice sharp and cutting. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, falsifying government records, and obstruction of justice." The room exploded. My mother blinked. "Excuse me." Before she could rise, another agent slapped cuffs on her wrists. "What is this?" she snapped, twisting violently. "I'm the victim. You'll have a chance to explain that," the agent said calmly. "After we finish our forensic sweep of the offshore accounts and the Wilmington crematory payments." Michael stood up fast, but 2 agents were already behind him. "You too," one said. "We've got you on at least 5 counts of wire fraud and conspiracy. Let's not add resisting arrest to the list." I stared. Frozen, unblinking, my mother thrashed in her seat, shouting over her shoulder as they dragged her away. "She broke into my house, she's lying, this is her fault." But no one listened, not anymore. And then through the chaos he stepped in, my father, wearing the same coat from the cabin, eyes tired but burning with purpose. He moved past the crowd like a wave, walked straight toward me. "I'm sorry I was late," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The words didn't register at first. Not until I saw the look in his eyes. And then I ran, right into his arms. The cuffs bit into my wrists, but I didn't care. I clutched him with everything I had left in me. "You came back," I choked. "I thought. I couldn't contact you. I was in protection. The second the case was solid, I came, I swear." We stood there like that for a moment, long enough for someone to finally notice. The judge cleared his throat. "Remove those cuffs," he said, voice stern. The bailiff stepped forward, fumbling with the keys. As the metal clicked free from my wrists, I felt something shift. Not just in the courtroom, in me. I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't framed, or forgotten, or naive. I was done being their pawn. And now the entire world knew the truth. A month later, I sat on the porch with my father. The same man whose name I once read on a fake death certificate, now beside me in flannels, sipping coffee like we had all the time in the world. The leaves had started to change. Burnt orange and yellow and that deep red that always made fall in North Carolina feel like a postcard. The breeze was light, but enough to make me pull my sweater tighter. Neither of us said much at first, but that was okay. Silence didn't hurt anymore, not between us. He reached over, refilled my cup. "Still prefer it black," I smiled faintly. "Still hate cream." He nodded like it was an answer to more than just coffee. For a while, we just watched the wind stir the trees. Finally, he said it. "You saved everything." His voice was soft, quiet enough that I could pretend I didn't hear it if I wanted to. "But not just the money," he continued. "Not just the evidence. You saved me even when I didn't believe you'd forgive me." I stared straight ahead. "I almost didn't." He didn't flinch. "I wanted to hate you for disappearing," I added. "For letting me grieve you. For dragging me into a war I didn't even know existed. You had every right." I turned to him. "But I also get it now. You didn't run because you were scared. You ran because they made you believe you had no way out." His throat tightened. "I didn't think I did." "I didn't either," I admitted. Not until the moment she had me in that station, smiling, crying fake tears, and I realized I wasn't mourning anymore, I was fighting. He set his cup down. "I watched that footage in the courtroom over and over after. You didn't blink once when they took her out." "I couldn't afford to." He smiled sadly. "You look more like your mother than I ever wanted you to." I laughed under my breath. "I used to hate when people said that. Now I want to rip out every photo of her face." He leaned back in his chair. "You know, when I first met Diane, she was electric, smart, confident. Everyone admired her." "She still knows how to perform," I muttered. "But you don't," he said. "You don't pretend. That's why she underestimated you. She thought truth was a weakness." I looked down at my hands. They didn't feel weak anymore. "So what now?" I asked. He looked out at the trees, thoughtful. "I've been talking to a publisher about the memoir." I raised a brow. "Seriously," he nodded. "The whole thing, not just the betrayal, but the system, how easy it was to fake a death, how many cracks exist." I felt a flicker of something I hadn't in weeks. Purpose. "I want in," I said. There's too many people who get destroyed like this, framed, silenced. I don't want to just survive it, I want to use it. He reached over, placed his hand over mine. That's my girl. We sat like that a little longer, just a father and daughter on a porch. But between us, a quiet understanding had settled. Not everything had been fixed, but we were. And for now, that was enough. 2 years later, I stood behind a microphone. A sea of faces looked up at me, some curious, some skeptical, others with that glassy, familiar look. The kind that comes from being cracked open by betrayal and not yet knowing how to put yourself back together. I knew that look. It used to live in my mirror. My name is Claire Simmons, I began, hands steady, voice calm. And I was once the daughter of a dead man, a thief, and a woman with no soul. But I'm also something else. I paused. Let the silence sit for a second. I'm someone who refused to let other people write my story. Applause didn't matter. What mattered were the women in the back row, the ones holding pens and notebooks like they were collecting pieces of themselves. This was a panel on digital security and identity theft, but it had become more than that. I'd been invited not just as an expert, but as someone who lived it, survived it, rebuilt from it. Beside the stage sat my father, now gray-bearded and calm, holding a copy of his memoir. Dead on paper, surviving the scam that nearly erased me. He didn't like the spotlight much anymore, but he never missed a chance to watch me take mine. Our company, I continued, was born out of panic. I wanted to make sure no one else would wake up to find their name hijacked, their finances drained, their own parent testifying against them with a face full of crocodile tears. A few chuckles. One knowing groan. But over time, I realized something else, I said, voice softening. It's not just about protecting your data, it's about protecting your truth. Because when someone tries to rewrite who you are, the most radical thing you can do is not let them. After the session, people lined up to ask questions, share stories, hand me business cards. One woman, eyes brimming with tears, whispered, "Your story, it's mine too, in pieces." I hugged her. "Then let's put them back together," I said. Later that night, I sat on the hotel balcony, sipping tea as the city hummed below. My father stepped outside, settling beside me. "Your mother called from prison last week," he said after a pause. I raised an eyebrow. "Wants to appeal," he nodded. "She still thinks she can twist the ending." I took a slow breath. "She already lost the only thing that ever made her dangerous," I said. "Control." He smiled faintly. "You don't hate her anymore, do you?" "I don't need to," I said. "She's no longer the main character." I leaned back, watching the skyline shimmer. Sometimes people closest to you are your greatest tests, but sometimes they're also your greatest revelations. And justice, it isn't revenge. It's reclaiming your voice and refusing to let anyone silence it again.